everyone to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Luke Plating. I'm a senior consultant with Bridge Innovate. Just a bit of background on myself. I've spent about 7 years at Bridge Innovate, specializing in customer experience and technology. My work focuses on helping organizations create more meaningful connections through technology and human-centered customer insights. So, for those of you who don't know anything about Bridge Innovate yet, for over 20 years, Bridge Innovate has partnered with leaders to solve problems and simultaneously build their leadership capabilities. So this series, Leaders in the Arena, is designed to share valuable insights and lessons from our clients and from our network, just as inspiration for other leaders who are in the arena. A bit more about Bridge. What we do is we empower teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. So our co-design approach aligns teams, fosters buy-in, and drives meaningful change, empowering you to shape your future. So our clients typically engage with us for our consulting services, our future lab sprints, leadership and team development, and many book their meetings and engage with us at our studio space in the Chattanooga area. So thank you for joining us. I am very excited today to have with us Marc Hoppers. So Marc is the managing partner at the High Edge Group. He has over 20 years of experience helping Fortune 1000 and high growth companies. Marc is a true leader in business transformation. And as a founder of the High Edge Group, he is known for helping CEOs turn strategy into tangible results. Marc specializes in go-to-market integration, strategic simplification, which we'll talk about today, and digital transformation, all while optimizing organizations for growth. So his leadership really provides companies with the clarity and the confidence needed for making critical decisions. He's a thought leader. He's a sought-after speaker on topics like AI strategies and business transformation. So I'm really excited to welcome Marc, and we're really glad to have you with us to talk about today's topic, which really centers around AI and simplification for growth. So almost not necessarily going back to the basics, but really just like how can teams really simplify and kind of strip away a lot of the unnecessary parts and complexity to be effective. So thanks for joining us, Marc.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So one of the topics we were talking about ahead of this session is really around ruthless simplification or strategic simplification. And so, my background in digital marketing and automation, I've seen that, adding tools and processes doesn't necessarily always mean adding value. It sometimes adds clutter, right? So I would really love to hear your take on how this, or, how do you define this concept of ruthless simplification? And how does it cut through that noise? And, how does it differ from that? We typically hear about optimizing for efficiency.
Yeah, and I think that optimizing for efficiency is really kind of what we've been doing for decades now, right? With the tools that we've had at our the available tools we've had, and I think about all the process improvement engagements that I've worked on, and looking at how to do systems enabled re-engineering, even where we think about using tools to automate our businesses. And in a lot of cases, I think, especially in large organizations, we saw a lot of that systems-enabled reengineering work effectively make the existing process go faster, and that was the objective. And back then, especially I'm thinking coming out of the Y2K, transformation, and into even when we started seeing more of the SaaS movement. We were just automating what we were already doing, which is good. It's helpful, and it also it did things like get data into a central repository, which was also very valuable and a necessary step for where we are today. What I think that's by ruthless simplification, I'll just kind of define what I mean by that. And I think it's really taking that traditional perspective of making our existing processes go faster and standing it on its head and saying, do we really even need to be doing those processes? Do we have sacred cows we're not willing to walk away from just because we've always done it that way? Do we have silos in our business that are keeping either information or processes or adding, keeping information from other, silos in the organization? Or do we have to cross silos and wait on processes to move forward. And a lot we're talking about, kind of go to market and sales stuff, that domain today. But this, you can think about this for really any business function, whether it's finance, HR, or a core operational process. This applies to all of that. But what's happened in the last year and a half, 2 years, 2+ years, since we had OpenAI burst onto the market under the Microsoft investment, and then it's a movement that had been underway burst into the public scene, and now we are all playing. Now we're all impacted by this AI movement, whether it's in our businesses or in our personal lives, and by ruthless simplification with AI. Now we have the ability to really to ask those questions in a way that where we're not really even we cannot just make an existing process go faster. We can actually make that process fade into the background or eliminate it, because we can have software agents running in the background doing things, both faster, better, cheaper, but also rethink whether we even need to have a human involved in doing them.
Yeah, so you mentioned, this concept can be applied throughout the whole organization,
Yeah.
HR operations. But obviously, here my background's in marketing, and I know you have a lot of
Yep.
experience working with sales and business development. What are some examples? So, what are some practical examples of the AI integration being used to improve, or like you said, allow processes to kind of fade into the background? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, in this, I'll speak specifically to the sales domain, but I'm sure we've all been on a call that's been recorded by AI, and a transcript has been produced, and perhaps a meeting summary. I think this concept of conversation intelligence has burst onto the scene in the sales area. There's tools, I mean, you can use, certainly the platform providers, the hyperscaler providers have these kinds of tools available. I'm thinking specifically of like Microsoft's Copilot, which has some integration to its Dynamics suite for sales. But there's other tools that have kind of come on the scene in the last 18 months, like Gong and Chorus AI, where they'll actually record your call, and they'll start the AI will take the recording of that call and do sentiment analysis on the call. And so you'll be able to start to identify things like, every time a sales rep, or an SDR, for example, setting a meeting, does a certain behavior, the meeting gets set, or there's a trigger in the conversation that the AI can identify the pattern that we as humans may not be able to see. A great example that I've got, I had a conversation earlier this week about, was where the conversation AI was able to identify that in the third meeting, there was a specific pattern of information passed along that was essentially a tipping point to indicate whether that prospective customer would buy or not buy. And so that's a huge help to sales reps, but also sales managers. I think the other thing that going back upstream in the process is intelligent lead scoring and prioritization, and just thinking about you, Luke, and some of the conversations we've had about the marketing, getting those marketing leads to flow into a sales team. Now we have the ability to do a lot more of the intelligence on the lead that used to have to be done post lead generation, to prep for the call, or to identify, to put human eyeballs on a lead to figure out what the indicators were, and prioritize that lead based on certain other behaviors in the market, or in the market, or in that company. Now the rep gets a lead that is automatically scored and prioritized when they show up, in the office, or when they open their laptop up, they have an idea of what to do next. It's all of that is happening, can happen behind the scenes, and the rep doesn't have to spend their time doing that work themselves. They can actually get in front of the customer as quickly, or the prospective customer as quickly as possible. And I think I'll stop there. I've got
Yeah. And I think too, they're armed with more information as well when they do get in front of that customer. And I'm just thinking from the marketing perspective, in the past, think about A/B testing. We would create a handful of landing pages or email variations, test for weeks, declare a winner, and then implement for everyone. But that really kind of ignores the fundamental truth that there's not really like a single best experience for everyone. And so what
right.
these new tools are allowing us to do is be like very, very personalized. I think of one example. One tool I use a lot is Webflow, and they recently purchased this AI platform called Intellimise. And it analyzes thousands of visitor signals, device location, referral source, time of day, previous behavior, and will actually adapt campaign landing pages
Yeah,
based on the specific visitor. So like headlines, images, social proof, even all the call to actions will shift dynamically based on what's
yeah,
most likely to resonate with the individual. And so, you get a couple things out of that. You get a better conversion rate. But also then the salesperson knows, here's what's resonating with that lead. And now I have more information I can bring to that initial meeting. I already know, somewhat of what they're interested in. I don't have to make it a pure discovery call. I can,
yeah. You just hit 2 points that I think are really good, and something I'm really excited to get to explore. I'm excited to try this out, with a client where when they've got the right maturity, is this idea of a dynamic sales playbook. We've worked on sales playbooks for years, and they've been static, and they get produced. Maybe they get updated once a quarter, maybe. But that's a lot of human effort, but we have now the ability with all this AI and the account intelligence to be able to do a dynamic playbook for the sales rep who actually is going to reach out to that prospective customer. And so you're arming that salesperson with a very much like the dynamic landing pages. You're arming them with an ability to get the right message to help that prospective customer solve the problem that they have, in the context of the problem. And it's not just bringing a solution that might be tailored towards their industry or type of size company, but it's very tailored to their specific situation that can be dynamically determined. So that sales reps following a new playbook, and the net result of all these tools is the constant problem that we see across sales organizations, and this is true for sales organizations, for partner ecosystem leaders. It's how do you spend more time in front of either prospective or existing customers? How do you get those reps more time, more face time or more phone time with those prospective customers to help them solve their problems? And that's really what all of these tools are doing, which is the ultimate objective of sales leaders and leaders in companies. Is they want their salespeople to be more effective, which means they need to be spending more effective time in front of those customers.
yeah. I think that gets back to, focusing on what really matters. And so I'm curious from your perspective, especially looking at sales, there's a lot of complexity in the modern sales environment. There's a lot of, metrics and goals and all that, that just get kind of thrown around. But what you're saying is very interesting as far as getting that face time, building those relationships. So I'm curious how companies can kind of balance that need for simplification with the complexity of a modern sales environment, really focus on what matters.
Yeah, and that's a really a good question. I think there's kind of in my mind two kinds of complexity. There's necessary and unnecessary complexity. There's necessary complexity in many organizations that I've been in, where there's just there's a lot of complex, sometimes there's complex and complicated environments. Sometimes there's complex environments, and it's for a good reason. It's because that you need that complexity to be able to add the proper value to the customer relationship so that you can get to a sale and a delivery of whatever the product or service is. There's also just a lot of unnecessary complexity that just adds friction to environments, and it's just that, whether it's silos or whether it's just too many steps in the process, too many checkpoints in the process, which is kind of why I like this idea of ruthless simplification, and that AI agents or automations can enable, and that could take the the idea that could take the form of just a simple integrations that allow you to get data faster to the rep or faster in front of the customer, assuming the rep even has to be involved. And so I think there's there's a couple of ways to think about this too. One of the ways I like is kind of a concept that I'm bringing over from this idea of an innovation budget. When you bring an innovative idea, I won't get into all the zero-based approaches that we could talk about, but if you take a zero-based thinking approach to this, you can think about a complexity budget where if you're gonna do something, you have to take something away. So if you're gonna spend money, for example, on an integration to allow an AI agent to go do something, you have to remove an equivalent cost or effort based process, to make sure that you're balancing, and not just making a complex environment more complex. And I think that's just a simple example, but I think that there's a number of things you can think about that. But I think the biggest one is just focus on what's necessary and what's unnecessary. And, I think and really keep that customer in mind. What adds the value at the right point in the sales process, to get that customer what they need so they can make a decision about whether to buy or not buy.
Yeah. I like that approach, and I think what you talked about, kind of sacrificing a concept for a tool for another, tool or process. That could be a good starting point or framing for a lot of organizations that want to adopt, some of these new tools and processes and integrations that are out there, but just feel like it adds complexity. What can we remove or replace by adding this? And when you talk about what really matters, what key metrics should a business be focusing on when they're measuring the success of these sales transformation efforts? You mentioned like the what was it, the time spent on complexity or something. Yeah, are there any key metrics that we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I think one of the good and bad things about the modern sales environment is that there's a lot of metrics, and we've and I think it's true of marketing too, right? I mean, there's almost too many metrics that become available when you automate some of these when you have a system to manage some of these processes. I think the one, I always like to start with revenue, which is the ultimate outcome of the sale. And so really a key I look at revenue acceleration. So how do you essentially improve time to revenue? And so effectively that means, how do you shorten the sales cycle to get to where a prospective customer becomes a contracted customer and revenue begins to flow, which is the ultimate kind of metric of sales. There's other metrics, so and if you back into that, you've got kind of standard metrics around deal velocity and conversion rates, and you can kind of go granular on that. I think the other interesting part of this is quality of revenue, and that's really customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, and thinking about how how you are looking at the theoretically, when you're going into this exercise, you're looking to accelerate the time that a seller has in front of a prospective customer. You want them to spend less time with the customer, and the idea being that you can get that customer to a decision point and either qualify them out, which is a good thing sometimes, or you can qualify them in and pursue them and get to that contracted revenue faster. I think that the last point I'll make on this is there's an experience component to this that I think is really important because in many ways a sales job, it's selling is hard, and so improving that seller experience is a big deal for employee retention, job satisfactions, and all the things that lead to employee retention, and especially so you can retain the right talent in the right roles. I think this also, it has a big advantage to help a company think about how to improve the customer experience. And so, if you've got a sales rep calling into a prospective customer and they're armed with the right information and they make the most use of that customer's time, that will improve the customer experience through the buying cycle and to get you to that contracted revenue. And I think that's maybe a more intangible. It's a little more difficult to measure. It's a subjective measure, but it's not. I don't think we can overlook the impact. It should be the new technology should be enabling.
Yeah. It should, in a lot of ways, be freeing you up to create more human relationships in a lot of ways, right? Because I think metrics are great and I love data. I'm a total data nerd, but I do think, at least on the marketing side and on the sales side as well, the temptation is to reduce the customer to a number. And oftentimes forget that, there's a real person with needs and, values and, behind that number. And so I like what you said about improving the customer experience. And what we're seeing in the market too is just as customer loyalty is lower than ever before. And retention is hard, but referrals are, customers, their trust of brands is not very high. So that just means referrals and anyone you can retain becomes, so important to your company. And so that is really driven by having these relationships, these great customer experiences where they feel heard and taken care of and really valued by your organization. That's what's going to drive them to recommend you to somebody else to stay on with your with your organization, whatever product or service you're selling, and ultimately will help drive a lot of growth. So yeah, that's I like how you framed that. I think that's resonates a lot with what I've seen on the marketing side as well. All right. Well, I'm curious, do you have any examples or like a quick case study where some simplification AI integration has led to sustainable growth within a sales team?
Yeah, I we talked about this the other day, and I do. It's interesting because I think a lot of companies are in the early parts of their journey. But I do have a client that spent. They looked at with the first when we started looking at their sales process just to get some ideas about where we might pilot this or experiment. There were over 20 checkpoints in their sales cycle, and that's where a sales rep had to go to a sales manager or finance or legal, some other human to get, and it was usually an automated process. So a notification would get sent over here to a sales manager to get approval to go to the next stage, or it would go to finance to approve a proposal budget. It would go to, whatever. There were a number of checkpoints. But when we really looked at, and this company had frustrated prospects. I mean, their prospects couldn't figure out why it took so long to get a proposal, why it took so long to get they were pretty good at getting to a demo, but then once you hit the demo and you got approval or you got agreement to move on to the next step, everything was just hard. And so we actually looked at these 20 steps and checkpoints and consolidated it and basically blew up all the assumptions we were making. And we still need legal, we still need finance, we still need sales. The sales manager needed to approve progressing a deal at a certain point, but they didn't need to be involved in every step, approving every step change or stage change. So we consolidated a lot of the deal approvals into what became 5 approval steps that the rep had to go through. And the impact of that was that reps were saying they were spending, it cut their admin time by half, by about 45%. And so that was what that was telling us. And we'll see results after more time to get better metrics, but we're expecting seller time is increasing, like seller time in front of customers is increasing. We're expecting that, what we've already seen, qualification improve because they're able to qualify out faster, because they're able to get proposals in front of their prospective customers faster. So they're qualifying out faster, which means they're spending more time with the customers who actually do want to proceed through the buying cycle, their buying cycle. But I think that we'll see. I expect the sales teams, and specifically some of the more transactional sellers in this organization, are seeing that their experience, that they anecdotally report their experience has improved. We'll see if that sustains, but I think that it's empowered this company just to start to think, what else can they be looking at? What other process can they be looking at to blow up? And like as I said earlier, stand on its head and rethink the way that they're looking at their customer, their processes, to improve both customer and employee experience, with the ultimate objective of getting to revenue faster. It's more effective use of the people and more effective, the more effective of conversion of leads to revenue.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's really great stuff, Mark. Well, first of all, I want to invite members of our audience. If you have any questions or comments or anything to add or ask, please post in the chat. We'd love to address anything you share. But just as we wrap up here, for somebody who's starting that simplification journey, looking to, improve in the ways that you mentioned, what is 1 or 2 small steps that they could take immediately, this week or next week to really get started?
I think this doesn't sound like a quick step, but I think the big piece, the big starting point here is to have an understanding of your existing processes. And so, whether you go into a full-blown process documentation effort, or it's, something even having a crude understanding of your processes, but it's really understanding the process that you have your people following that's maybe baked into your sales systems or other systems. But then also starting to understand what they really do, like, because there's the sales process, and then there's what actually people do, and sometimes those aren't always aligned. But I think the biggest part is just to start somewhere, and start to do look for small ways to succeed, and be prepared to pivot along the way, because some things will work and some things won't. I'm not a big believer in saying you need to use this technology or that technology, but because there's a lot of options and every organization is a little bit different. But I would just say start by understanding your existing processes and then deciding where you want to start. Just start thinking about where you could use AI or some kind of automation, and then move towards proof of concept or a pilot in that area, and start to prove it. And the data will tell you whether you should keep investing or move on to another one.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, and for anyone in the audience, if you're interested in getting started or just exploring some concepts, around experience design and service design mapping, we'd love to support you. So feel free to reach out to us. I do want to wrap up here. I know we're just about at time, but we've got some other engagement opportunities coming up. But thank you, Mark, so much for
Yeah.
sharing your insights on this topic. Super valuable. And I do want to invite our audience members to join us for a couple upcoming test drives. We've got on April 22nd and April 30th, some test drives with our partners at Experience Point. So Experience Innovation Learn is a simulation where participants form teams to explore a business challenge and really learn the fundamentals of design thinking through the process. And Experience Change is this really cool virtual simulation where you'll get to be part of a change team and interview stakeholders, identify pain points, and select strategies to gain buy-in as you try to turn this organization around. So really great complementary opportunities that you can find at bridgeinnovate.com/events. We've also got a number of other Leaders of the Arena episodes coming up as well. So please join us for those. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Mark. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your day.